everybody, and welcome to a special episode of DeLorean Tech. Today we're proud to present an exclusive interview with John Z. DeLorean's son, Mr. Zach DeLorean. The interview was conducted by Tamir Ardon, famous DeLorean historian, at DCS 2021 earlier this year. On behalf of DeLorean Tech, I'd like to extend special thanks to Zach, Tamir, and DCS director Rich Weisensel for making this interview possible and for sharing it with the DeLorean community. We hope you enjoyed this video, and once again, thanks for watching.
I'm sure, I don't know, is this the first, for anyone here, is this the first time you actually saw this film? Oh, really? Nice. Sober, all right, that counts. So yeah, I mean, obviously for most of the people, the film came out 2 years ago now, so I would assume, or hope most DeLorean owners have seen it. But I'm just so happy to have Zach here at one of our shows. I mean, obviously he was the star of the film, even though he didn't know it at first. I don't know about that. No, you did your dad right with participating in that film, and I think, you know, obviously Zach and I have known each other for almost 20 years now. You know, these shows had helped me, Ken's shows back in the past had helped me develop relationships with a lot of the people that you see in the film that are sort of from the factory side of things, and then just through my own chutzpah, I've sort of figured out ways to develop relationships with some of John's family, John at first, and then Catherine, and then Zach. And, you know, I've always viewed this story as a very multi-layered one and not black and white, which, if taken with the wrong approach, like a lot of things get done, especially in journalism these days, you know, you don't necessarily see the minutia of everything and everyone's side. And for me, the family, the emotional side of John's story was such an important one, and I think one that helped at least bring John's character and life more to the forefront of just the traditional, like, this is, you know, the drug bust stuff and the car stuff. And so, you know, Zach, once again, thank you for participating in the film, because it makes it what it is. And, you know, we're all excited to have you here.
Thank you.
I don't necessarily know how we want to conduct this, other than, you know, I think at first it'd be great for you to tell people a little bit about your hesitancy in the past to want to even chat about the DeLorean car and your pops to the general public, and how things have sort of shifted and morphed since your participation in the project.
So like growing up, being real young, not understanding really what was going on with my parents, their notoriety, their fame, and then what my dad was trying to do. When you're a kid, that kind of goes over your head. You don't really, you don't have the life experience to put it all together. And so I was always very uncomfortable, even before the trial, with like the idea of my dad building something and all these people knew more about what was going on than I did. And always having a camera in your face when you're out with your parents always pissed me off and annoyed me. That's why I'm never smiling in any of the pictures. Then, you know, the car took off, and then he got busted, and then that's when things really kind of went further downhill for me in life, and that just took it to a whole nother level of people coming into my life and scrutinizing it and asking me questions and getting fucked with at school, and having to fight back and defend my mom and my family and my sister and things like that. And so I lived in LA for a while. My dad and I had a falling out when I was a teenager. Then I eventually moved back home to New York, New Jersey area. And out in Jersey, he had a it was a farm, so we had like a farm office, and there's always what was the organization that had the magazine, like DeLorean World or something like that. And yeah, and so there was always like a couple copies of those around, and I'm like, it just never made any sense to me why there's like this whole organization about this car. To me, there was more bad connotations with the car for me personally at that point in my life, and then for a long time after that, probably all the way up until you came with this documentary, and you know, people asking you questions, not knowing how to answer them. It makes me uncomfortable. I don't understand all this. I don't want to deal with it. It's done. It's over. So for my whole life, I just flew real as far under the radar as I possibly could. And my dad died in 2005. My sister calls me like 2 or 3 months after I think you came out. And she's like, so she had been involved in a couple of these shows. And I was like, okay, that's great for you. And so she calls me up, she's like, yeah, I got this guy, he wants to do a documentary on Dad. I'm like, yeah, great, you know, fucking man. And you know, guy's been in the ground for like 2 days, and already somebody wants to talk to me. And I was living in Ohio, I was doing tree work, and basically at that point in my life, all I was doing was working 10 or 12 hours a day, 5 or 6 days a week, coming home, showering, drinking some beers, going to sleep, and doing the whole cycle over. And so I told my sister, I'm like, she said, think about it, and I'm like, okay. So I think about it for a few days, and I call her back, and I'm like, all right, look, I got some ground rules. If this guy comes, you need it. And I told her in my way, I was like, look, if he comes in this house and fucks with me, I'm gonna throw him out the door. And I was like, you can explain it to him however you want, but I'm just telling you what's gonna happen. And because up until then, there's been, people always want to know about the cocaine. They don't want to know about anything else. The cocaine, the trial, that's what's going to make the movie. That's what society, we don't like the underdog creating a car and becoming famous. We like the underdog who makes the car, goes down with, you know, getting caught in a hotel room with 33 kilos of cocaine. So that's kind of what I thought this was going to turn into. And that's not really an aspect of my life that I really want to talk about. So he comes, we interview, he leaves, and I go about my business. And then like a year later, I think a year or two later, you came back and was like, you know, we're going to put you under contract, and you know, you can't sell your story for 2 years. I'm like, I don't even want to sell it now. I'm like, okay, you know, I could use a few $1,000, and so I signed on. And this and then you couldn't get it done. And then a year and a half later just goes by, he comes back to me, I'm like, Jesus Christ, man, are you just gonna get this done or what? You know?
Welcome to the film business.
I want to get this contract over. You know, I got shit I want to go do. And so this was going on for a really long time, and then it stopped for a while, and then I don't know when,
2016, yeah.
You came to me,
Yep.
and he's like, listen man, it's going through, we've got a new crew that's going to shoot it. Unfortunately, they viewed all the video footage, and the whole thing's got to be shot again. I'm like, dude, come on, man. There's not like 4 minutes of that shit you can't use. So,
I shot it myself, by the way. So it was not usable.
So I'm like, all right, man, cool. And a little bit more time goes by, and he's like, yeah, we got like Alec Baldwin. And so to understand why I'm about to say what I'm going to say is, over the years, I've paid more attention to politics, like with what's going on in our country, our politicians are fucked up. No, nothing has ever changed. And the decisions that they make really do affect my life on a daily basis. Now, when I was 20, I could care less who the president was. Nowadays, I really do care. I used to listen to a lot of conservative talk radio, like Glenn Beck and stuff, and they would talk about Baldwin. And I just knew this guy's just a leftist, crazy SOB, like, you know, on Saturday Night Live, and like he ranting, raving at his daughter, and I'm like, really, Alec fucking Baldwin is And I'm sure it went a little different than that, and so I'm like, all right, man, whatever. So 2017, I get a phone call. He's like, yeah, we're gonna be there in like, you know, a week or two, and I'm like, okay. And at the time, and I don't usually talk about stuff like this, but in 2016, I got a DUI. That's why I didn't drive up here. And I lost my license. I haven't gotten it back. I just am lazy about it. So 2 weeks before he shows up, I'm standing in front of a judge, and the judge throws the book at me. And I got to go to like a 7-day in-house treatment lockdown facility for re-education camp or whatever it is they do to you. And apparently that didn't really take, because last night I was drinking a bunch of beers. And so I have no license. They show up, and I gave, and what was interesting about it, and I don't think I ever told you this, so it was over 2 days. I think it was like 10 to 13 hours of interview, and they bring the car up, and the first day was the longest part, and I mean, I was pissed. Like, what you see up here is nothing. And I've told some of you guys that, like, what I was afraid of with the documentary was that when it came out, I would be up to my neck in lawsuits now for some of the things that I said. And so later that night after the interview, the first part of the interview, I got home and I was like, okay, man, this is kind of cool. Like, I've said my half of this, my part of the story, and somebody actually wanted to listen to what I had to say about the last, I don't know, maybe let's just say 35 years of my life. And I was like, okay, I'm just about done with all this. Like, this is good. I don't ever have to deal with this shit again. And so they bring the car up, and that was a real weird thing for going up to the car. And so we're going around and talking about the car, and Don gets in the car, I get in the car, and Tamir's like, well, would you mind driving up and down the street? And I was like, no, I can do that. So then I get to the end of my street. Now I have no license, driving one of my father's cars. I've got DUI, I've got a guy sitting in the passenger seat with a camera. We go down this hill, go to another stoplight, go down this other hill, and it's a major road, and there's like 4 different intersections coming into this one intersection. And we're sitting there, Don and I are talking, and I look around, and all these people are like looking at us, and I'm like, what the fuck are these people looking at? You know, like, no clue what I'm driving. And we take a hard right, and I punch the car. We're going down it's like a 45, 50 mile an hour road. I may have been doing like 65, maybe 70. And I'm thinking like, oh, this is gonna be fun explaining this to a cop when I get pulled the fuck over. Yeah. And we get back.
And I'm just gonna interrupt and say this is Ken Konsalik who let me borrow his car. I've got Zach driving it with no license under a DUI. Anything to get the film done.
And you know, we're at the stoplight, and the thing is like, the car needed a tune-up is what it needed, because it was running like shit. And it really was. You'd sit at the light, and it was like the RPMs were going up and down, and the car's doing this, and you can just hear the engine just like sputtering and stuff. So we're going down the road, we come back, and they leave, and so I'm sitting in the apartment with my dog, and And the amount of adrenaline, like after I leave this place, probably like when I get home, it's probably gonna be about 4 days of adrenaline dump out of my body. But I didn't really realize how much adrenaline I had going through me from 2 days of just dealing with all this. And since I had never ever talked about any of it, it took about a week for me to just be like, okay, like this is good, this is done, the stories, I've told my half of my story, and I don't ever have to deal with this again. And 2 years later, I'm up here, and I'm not quite sure how I got up here, but I'm here. And I don't know if that answers the question, but so nowadays, it's like these last couple of days have been great. So there's like what I consider my life before the documentary of complete isolation, not talking to anybody about anything. I mean, my sister and I don't talk about it. I never talked about it with my mother, never talked about it with my father. We never talked about the car even, years after the trial and everything. So for a long time, the car really didn't exist to me. And sitting in this room, that may be hard for other people, for this group to understand, but it was like, you guys see the cars one way and I saw it as a different way. You have your history with it and I have mine, and our histories are two totally different histories when it comes to the car. So being up here in the documentary, my life after the documentary has gotten better. I'm a little bit more open to talk. Like, this is the most I've ever talked to a bunch of strangers about my life, period, anywhere, anytime. It's always been friends that I've had for 20 years that have questions that I'll talk to, but like other people, not so much. And so my life after the documentary and being up here has really changed my perspective in my view of what the car really is and what my father was trying to do with it. And what was nice about the documentary was the way this one was done. It didn't just focus on 1982 with him getting busted. It showed, and there's only so much you can show in an hour and a half documentary, but I learned so much from watching it, and information that I didn't have personally. So it's not that because I didn't have the information, it doesn't negate how I viewed the whole situation and the way I felt. I just didn't have all the information like Bill Collins. When I saw the documentary with Bill in it, that broke my heart. I mean, like, I thought it was just my family who had to suffer through a bunch of shit. I had no idea that Bill Collins even existed. Now, he may have met me, but I don't ever remember meeting him. But the way he was treated by Chapman, by my father, mostly by my father, really, that kind of hit home. And so it really shows the whole progression of my father and who he was, and it framed him in a lot of good ways and a lot of bad ways, which are realistic and truthful and honest, which is good, which is what I've always wanted. And so the document, ever since that came out and coming up here, it's like a weight has been lifted off my chest. Like I feel like I can actually breathe. So
I don't know if that answers. No, it's great, Zach. I mean, I think it's great for everyone else to hear, and I think you're dealing with a friendly crowd. It was one of the reasons why I felt good about having Rich bring you up, and that I thought you'd enjoy interacting with the folks that I've gotten to know over the last 20 years, who are just all passionate about the car and also passionate about the story. I think you are a beautiful example of what makes filmmaking for me interesting, and that is with documentary filmmaking, you often will end up with certain subjects where the interviews are so cathartic that it's almost like a therapy session overdose. And it's definitely what Don and Sheena, the co-directors, and myself felt when the three of us were with you that whole weekend. shooting both the master interview and then a lot of the verite stuff. And I also want to note, I mean, him driving Ken's car, that was the first DeLorean you ever drove.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you had never driven one before.
Yeah.
Like, that was a big, it didn't make it into the film as one of those
That's
pinnacle
probably
moments.
good.
But it, exactly. But there was a lot of anxiety with the buildup of before the film came out, and Zach and I would have lengthy conversations where there was a lot of, and I had to tell him, I said, listen, you just have to trust in the process, and that we have your best interest at heart. Like, there's no gotcha scenario here from our part. This is not reality TV. This is a real film. And then I think it's an interesting story would be you telling how you first watched the film, because Zach wouldn't let me send him a screener beforehand, and he also didn't come out to the premiere. But maybe I think everyone would be interested in hearing how you first watched it.
So I knew the theater, I knew the documentary was coming out maybe in a few major movie theaters, like big theaters that you would see, but Cincinnati is not that type of, if you've been to Cincinnati, you would understand that it's just not that tight. Like, they would never throw that on the big screen in Newport, waste up screen space. Kids want the fucking Transformers. But we do have are like these little
Art house.
Indie film kind of, where you walk in, it's a big screen, and there's, say, 50 seats in it. So the night before, and I knew where it was playing, and I knew when it was coming out, and I had a day off. So I went out with a friend of mine the night before and got just hammered. And I woke up, and I was like, oh shit, man, I gotta get to the theater, and I was hungover. And do you guys know, like, a lot of cities have, ours is called the red bike, so you put these bikes in the racks, and you pay, and okay. So there was one of those on somebody's front yard at the end of my street. I'm like, yes, I got transportation, it's free. So I'm hungover, I'm riding this like dinosaur of a bicycle to the movie theater, sweating my ass off, and I get there, I get a ticket, and I go in, and I'm walking, and I'm like, they've got beer. Yeah, man, like, this is great. I haven't been to a movie in probably 20 years, and they got beer now. And then I'm getting a beer, and I see, oh, they got liquor, so I grab a couple Jack Daniel bottles, those little airplane things. I'm like, sweet, man, I'm probably gonna need all this. And I go into the theater, and there's like a few people in there, and so I find like the back row all the way at the end in the darkest corner, because I'm afraid, like, if right after people see this and they see me walking out, this is not anything I really want to deal with. So I go in and I watch it, and the very first footage is the
lie detector.
Lie detector.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of footage in here I've never seen before, actual footage, and I almost like broke down and cried, because that was like, now the shit is real. Like, there's my father taking a lie detector test. So, and then it's been, I think, at that point, like 15 years or something like that since my dad had passed away. And so over time, like, you kind of put your dad out of your mind. You don't think about him as much. It's 15 years later about his death is when he first died. When he first died, I was always thinking about him. So I came out, and I was like, go across the street, and I go grab a beer, and I'm sitting there drinking a beer at this bar, and I'm like, man, you gotta go back and see it again on the big screen. So I went back across the street, I got another ticket, I went in again, I got 2 more beers this time, and the second time around is when I really started paying attention to what was going on from start to finish. the first time was like, okay, there's my dad on the big screen, and then all of a sudden my fucking face pops up there, and then the dog's on there, and I'm like, this is just too weird, man. This is like, so you're not paying attention to all the nuances in the film, so that's why I went in for the second time. And when I came out, literally 5 minutes after I got out of the theater, I get this text message through Facebook, and it's this woman who lives up in Canada, and we're friends today. And she texts me, she goes, what'd she say? She goes, do you kiss your mother with that mouth? And I'm thinking like, man, I only said 2 dirty words in there. Man, if she'd really seen the interview, that would make it fucking...
It's the only reason the movie was rated R.
Exactly. You know,
There's like 35 F-bombs in that movie.
that's my claim to fame, man. So I text her back, and then I end up somehow being able to call Canada, because my plan, I don't have international calling, but somehow we were able to talk over the phone, and I had this hour-long conversation, like a half hour after I just got out of this movie, and I'm a little bit drunk, and I'm talking to this woman in Canada about it, and you know, and we text. We text about every 3 months for, you know, a half hour. So, like, that was my first, like, good and bad experience after the movie. Like, it was bad because it's like somebody's, like, cussing me out, like, hey, you fucking motherfucker. And then, but then, like, it all ironed out because, you know, we became friends. And there's a lot of that for me now with the texting and Facebook and some other stuff. But the initial experience was really, really strange.
Well, I just remember that I was relieved when I spoke with you after that viewing, because, you know, Zach was obviously, you've been affected by watching it, but there was all this anxiety from the buildup of the previous year that we had been having this back and forth conversation.
Oh yeah, I was seriously...
And it was just all washed away, and it was, for me, I mean, obviously, as a filmmaker, you want people to respond positively to your work. This was a whole nother level, because I'm hoping that, you know, the DeLorean community is going to love it as much as the general audience, and then obviously the people that I've grown to have relationships with that I don't want to, you know, compromise or hopefully have disappointed their trust. You're looking for an affirmation that they liked it, and you know, Catherine and Christina both, I provided them with advanced copies before the film came out, and each one of them reached out to me pretty quickly after I did that, and were just so enthusiastic about the way the film turned out. And so Zach was sort of the last missing link, and to have to wait until it actually got released, and for you to go to a movie theater on your own, I mean, it's bonkers. Like, it's just such an interesting approach and way to have watched it, but it's kind of definitely something unique that I could imagine, you know, was the right way for you to sort of ingest that first viewing of it.
Yeah, I didn't want to go with anybody I knew, because I didn't want to have this long, in-depth conversation about all kinds of stuff. And it was already a strange reality to have this whole story be my story, you know, my father, the car, the company, the divorce, the drugs, and to see it play out on a big screen like that in a theater where a lot of people are going to see it. When I came out, I didn't want to have to explain anything to anybody. Like, I needed to sit by myself for a while under a tree and just chill. But in a way that is kind of fitting the way I went by myself, because I do so many things in my life that I do by myself. I don't really I probably know 100 people, acquaintances and friends, but I probably only have 2 good friends that really, really know me. And that's kind of how I've led my whole life, is so to go see it by myself, I was like, yeah, it's probably a better idea for me to do it that way.
So now segue into this kind of weird and creepy bus.
Creepy.
So this was given to me as a wrap present by my directors and the head hair and makeup folks at Saturday Night Live, who did all of the hair and makeup recreations for the film. So this is a bust of Alex face, but also with the prosthetics that were made. So you got the chin and some of the nose stuff, and then this is the actual wig that Alec uses in the film, as well as the eyebrows. So after the film comes out and you see the performance, what was your thoughts on Alec and the way, not only the way he portrayed your father, but also sort of the meta aspects of him sort of trying to figure out your dad's motivations and pitfalls and accomplishments?
So, like you said, the opening scene was the actual footage of my dad, and then I think the next scene was like a scene of Alex reenacting something. And so
the transformation of the hair and makeup artist actually turning him into your pops.
Yeah. But then there's like, so I guess Alec is sitting in the chair and he's talking. He's got like, I think a picture of the four of us and the dog, and he's talking about it. And I'm kind of watching it, and I'm like, this guy's still an asshole. You know, like, I still think he's a jackass. But so I'm listening to him, and he's, you know, he sounds articulate, and I think he was really trying to understand really what was going through my dad's head from start to finish. Like, especially like, you know, he's got this. I think he even says it in the documentary. You know, he's trying to achieve this dream, and you know, and Alec is trying to figure out like what possessed him to go down this road and deal with all these people. He gave in the segues in between like the reenactments and the actual video or actual footage. When he was talking, I understand like where his mindset was. And just him trying to figure out the process, because the process he is talking about is the process that I've been trying to figure out for the better part of 30, 40 years of my life. So a lot of the questions he has are the same questions I had. I just was lucky enough to have more time to figure out the answers to my questions, which actually were addressed in the movie, even though you didn't know it. And they were answered even though you didn't know it. As far as the way he, like that one of the very first scenes where he's actually like portraying my father in a reenactment, I swear to God I was looking at my father. You know, like it was like creepy, like kind of scary creepy. I'm like, shit, did they bring him out of the grave? Like, what the hell's going on here? So, like overall, I think Alec did a really, really good job with the questions and the soul searching he was trying to find about my dad, and then the actual, like the makeup artist did a really great job with the look and capturing what my father looked like.
Yeah, what was shocking to me was Christina's reaction, your mom's reaction at the LA premiere, where she was highly complimented of the way they were able to. I mean, obviously there's only so much. You know, he wasn't as tall as John, he wasn't as svelte as John, but like the mannerisms, you know, sort of trying to capture the essence, that confidence. I thought he did a really excellent job with. But yeah, so you turned it around in terms of not being so negative on Alec playing him.
Yeah, no, I mean he's still crazy, but that's never going to change. But like as an actor, I would never take anything away from him. Like I've seen a lot of his stuff over the years, from like Beetlejuice all the way up, you know, through stuff. And I would never take anything away from his acting and his ability to act and portray people and characters and things like that. And, you know, I really do believe in my heart that he did do a good job, you know.
What elements from the film, because you've watched it many times, and you've also watched the extra scenes, which, you know, there's 77 minutes of bonus materials that, you know, one of the frustrating things for me is such a super fan, obviously, was having to figure out with my directors what really was important for the story that we were telling versus if we had a 5 hours of miniseries, you know, limited series type of ability. Because there's lots of interviewees that didn't even make it in the main film, but if you've seen the extras, you'll see some of their stories. What are maybe one or two things that you were either really shocked to see or archival that you hadn't even remembered until you saw it, either of you like in your New York apartment or things that were just kind of surprising? Is there anything that sort of stands out?
Yeah, a couple things. Some of the stuff I really loved was the archival photographs, where I don't know if that was like the lunch table, where there's that photo where there's all the executives they're sitting at that really long table. Mm-hmm. And even now when I see it, I'm like, well, no wonder nothing gets done. Look at how many fucking people they've got at one table, and none of them can decide on what they're going to do. It's amazing that any car in that company got produced. I mean, the table is like
General Motors did,
yeah.
A lot of corporate bureaucracy.
And it's lined on both sides.
Yeah.
And what I thought was cool, like a lot of those old, like the clothing and the way they dressed back then, it was all polyester, and and they looked like remember Rodney Dangerfield and Caddyshack? Ties and big lapels and sideburns and stuff. And one interview I thought, so like I said, I didn't really like some of the old footage of the GTO when he was standing in front of them presenting them the GTO and showing it. And they're like, what the hell is that, And he's like, I don't know what it is, but it's fast as hell, or whatever the line was. And like, it's those little bits, like that capture my dad. Like, I could see my father standing in the room being like, oh, GTO stands for something, 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 but I personally think it's fast as hell, Was the interview with Hillellen?
Hillellen, yeah.
That guy. And the part of the interview I thought was interesting was when he was talking about going to the locker, and he goes to the locker and then the cops show up, and later in the interview he's like, I can never prove it, but I'm pretty sure it was John. And I've lived with my father for a long time, and so when I say this, I mean, it is what it is, but that sounds like something that he would do.
Well, that's a good segue, actually, for Roy Yeseth. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, I always knew, like, at home, my dad was great. At home, he was a loving, caring father, husband. My mother may have something else to say about that, but there were two very, very different men. The guy at home and then the guy who went to work. So I always ask myself, this is one of the questions over the years I always ask myself, is like, how did he get this far in life? And, you start looking at his career and his success and fame, and then you look at somebody like Donald Trump, and then you look at Bill Gates, and you look at Bill Clinton, you look at the whole Clinton family, and you start putting all these things together, and it's like, they're all famous, they're all wealthy, they've all hit super, super high marks in life, and if anybody on the planet thinks all these people got there by being nice people and, playing nicey nice, sorry, I don't buy it. Like, I voted for Trump, I like Trump, Trump owns the house that I grew up in, it's now a golf course, but there's no way that guy made $9 billion without greasing a few palms down at City Hall, having Guido go bust some dude's kneecap to get him out of the building so he could tear it down and put up a skyrocket, and then you look at the Clintons and all these other people. And not to get into politics or anything, but so when I heard that, I'm like, yeah, I can, yeah, and I knew Roy, and I met all his kids, met them a bunch of times. Roy actually flew out and stayed with us in New Jersey, I think in 94, 95, helping my dad with some cases. And the three of us, I don't even think I told you this story, but the three of us, my dad gave me and my sister life leases to our property in Bedminster, New Jersey. It was a 430-acre farm. And he said he had it paid off with the mortgage company, and in doing so, he gave me and my sister life leases so when he died that we could live there or whatever. And then Morgan Roth, one of his lawyers, sued him, and it gets real complicated. So my sister and I had to have, this is how I got involved in all this shit in the 90s. Had I not gotten involved in all this stuff, my ass would be in Alaska right now. But, so we had to have our own lawyer, but I never wrote a check for this lawyer. So the money was coming for my father, through my father, to pay for our lawyers. But we had to have our own lawyers for our interests as opposed to our father's. So Roy's there. So it's me, Roy, and my father getting in the car. We go to this lawyer, and we're all sitting in the room with the lawyer. My dad's like, okay, we're done. And he pulls Roy aside, says something to him. I didn't know what he said. And he looked at, and I'm like 20, I think maybe 23 at the time. So it's not like I'm like 7. And he's like, all right, let's go. So I follow him out. The door shuts, and Roy's in there with my lawyer. I don't know what was said. I never asked any questions. It was one of those things like, I didn't want to fucking know anything, And Roy was always good with me and my sister, but the older I got and started trying to put pieces of the puzzle together, the more that guy kind of, in the back of my head, kind of scared the shit out of me.
Yeah, Roy is a fascinating character. For a lot of people that don't know Roy and sort of the history with him, he's sort of John's right-hand man, sort of devil on his shoulder, willing to do the dirty work, kind of keep John's hands clean of certain things. He's someone we weren't able to get super detailed or into in the film, and we allude to him at one point with the leaked GM speech, but he's definitely one of those people that had a great impact in a lot of dark ways in your dad's life. But I'm wondering if we want to open up to any questions at this stage. It's already 4:40, and then we can keep going from there. Any brave souls out there? Yeah.
What's your favorite memory of you and your dad?
Well, as a kid, before we had Lamington Farm, he had a ranch out in Palm Valley, California, and that's where I learned how to ride a motorcycle. That's where all my dad's motorcycles were. So him and I would ride like up through the hills up in California, all over California. Me on a Honda 50 doing 50 miles, but we would ride around on the property. It was a 600-acre avocado orange ranch. So we'd ride through the groves and on trails and things like that. And then that's one of them. That's when I was really young. And then when my parents got divorced, my dad had stayed out in California after the trial. And he was going to church. I'd have to go to church with him. But the church that he went to, there was a lot of fathers and sons that rode dirt bikes, motocross bikes. So the church would plan these, and I think I was like 13 at the time. We went on a bunch of these trips. There were weekend-long trips. We'd go out to Mojave, Joshua Tree, Death Valley, and we'd ride motorcycles for 3 or 4 days out there. So it was a father-son church bonding, get to know each other kind of thing. That's when I broke my arm. My mother told me, you better not come home with anything fucking broken. Those were her exact words. And sure enough, she got back from the trip and she had to take me to the hospital, or not the hospital, but a doctor, and he had to break my arm clean, reset it, and then I had a plaster cast for 2 months, and then I got a fiberglass cast for another 2 months. But and then that was like in my teenage years with my dad in LA, and then the time that I really enjoyed spending with him was when I moved back from Washington, D.C. I think I was like 21, 22 years old, had no clue what I wanted to do, came back, I had long hair, I'm smoking dope and smoking weed, getting high all the time. And so I went to work for him on the farms, moved back into the house, and we'd always eat dinner together every night, we'd have breakfast together every morning, we'd watch auto races like Schumacher and F1 racing and motocross and stuff like that, and it was like that for a very long time when I finally moved back home. Watching a championship NBA game and we're drinking red wine together. So those are like, so there's different stages for me in my life with my father, and I really kind of enjoyed those years. And then when he declared bankruptcy and we lost the farm, then I moved in with my girlfriend and her parents down in Freehold, New Jersey, which was about an hour and a half drive south of where my dad and Sally were living. So even then we would meet like once a week for lunch and once a week for dinner. So we still maintained that relationship, and then I moved here in '03, or not here, but Cincinnati in '03. Yep.
More of a comment. I just want to say thank you for your contributions. We greatly appreciate you coming out here. It's awesome to meet you and stuff. At car shows, we were talking about how you didn't want to see another movie about all the cocaine deals and all that stuff. I can say from personal experience, I go to the car shows and stuff a lot in the Chicago area, and I have to dispel those stories all the time. And I defend your dad all the time. I try to get that story straight and spread it to people to get it right. That they're like, oh, well, he was arrested. No, he was not arrested. He was acquitted. And but he was a dealer. He was not. And I watching the documentary and owning my car for 3 years now. I'm fairly newer to the community. I've loved being in it for many years. It hits home to me. It really does. And I think I speak for everybody when I say you have an extended family here. You truly do, and I know we're all strangers to you. You don't know any of us from anyone, but we appreciate you coming out. So thank you.
Yeah. So I guess I got here Wednesday. Wednesday was kind of a long day. I spent a lot of time traveling. I think I spent it was close to 10 hours or something. But we made a pit stop, and I saw Rich's D-Rex and the 90-foot limo and stuff like that. And I love all that stuff, man. I do. So yesterday was like really the first day, because like when I got here Wednesday, man, I was wiped out and I was tired. We had dinner. I was talking to a couple, and by the time I got upstairs, man, I was done. And so Thursday was really like the day I got to interact with a lot of people, for the amount of people that were already here, and check out some of the cars and things like that. And I really appreciate you inviting me up here to be here and to see all this and experience it. I have everybody I've met has been just awesome and inviting and welcoming and friendly. And I think so. When I agreed to come up here, Tamir, and talk to Rich and stuff, the day I left. Well, first of all, I had to put my dog in it, I don't do it like when I'm out here because I'm interacting more, so it takes my mind away from my dog. But like when I'm in the room, like there's like webcams, like I'm like dog reality TV, and I'm like, where's that motherfucker? He better be in there. There he is, like humping some dog over there. Like that boy, way to represent the DeLorean family. And but it's and I was real apprehensive, man, because I really didn't. I almost canceled, and I was like, don't cancel, the dog's gonna be fine. Like, that's the reason why I wouldn't have come up here. And so the day I got picked up, I'm walking the dog and drop him off, and I'm just sitting in the car, Don and I are talking, and in my head, I'm like, just put all your
take what you think you know is gonna happen and put it over here and just clear your mind and clear your heart and go up there and like don't make any judgments until you get up there, you know, because it's like, and I'm not gonna speak for everybody, but as I think as people, as a society, I think it's very easy for us to judge and look at somebody and say, oh, X, Y, Z, and not even know. And so, and not to do it intentionally or not to be mean about it, you know, it's just, I think it's just something we do, like when we see somebody on the street. And so I had to make a real conscious decision. I'm like, look, man, you know, if there's a Doc Brown up there, fuck it, it's cool, you know, whatever. And this is part of why you're going up there, is to experience all this shit. So, and when I got up here and I started talking to people on Thursday and listening to stories and seeing what people are doing with their cars and why they do them, and listening to a lot of the speakers up here and hear them talk and their perceptions of the car and things like that, it has helped me to see things in a very different light. So in Tamir's documentary, I said the car and I have a very love-hate relationship. And then in the other documentary, I said, and I think sometimes it's hard for people to understand where I'm coming from when I say things like this. Like when I see the car going down the road, I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. And then I'm like, yeah, I kind of wish I had a hand grenade, you know. So, but now, and what I think you guys have to understand is, I have never been around this many DMCs and have been able to spend this much, and I'm talking about the car, and spend that much time looking and checking it out and really taking the time to understand it and look at it. And the last time I think I was able to do that was when I was in Ireland with my father. Until then, it's always you see one parked and then you go get ice cream and it's gone, and then it's only going down the road. So hearing everybody's story and coming up here and seeing how you guys interact with me and how you treat me and how you treat the car and your stories, and it definitely paints it in a different picture. So like when I go home now, so now I'm starting to have a better appreciation for the car. I think the car's kind of creeping in my heart a little bit more, with a little bit more love towards it, you know? I think I can appreciate it more. I can appreciate more of what my father was trying to do. And, you know, it's like, you know, and then last night, I'm not gonna get into details. A couple guys, they're like, yeah, man, you wanna go get beers, you know? And so we're having beers, or 20, and it's 3 a.m. in the morning, you know, and I had a good time. You know, it was, you know, hanging out with those guys would be like me hanging out at home with a bunch of my good friends, and, you know, having a couple cases of beer and we just get hammered till 3 in the morning, you know. So it's you know, it's just been a really enjoyable experience coming up here and doing all this. Like I said, I mean, I'm going to be tired as hell when I get home, and the adrenaline and everything else. But you know, this community is great. You know, there's, and we were talking about it earlier. It's like if you go to like a park on a Sunday, and you got all the Ferrari guys, you know, and they're usually older men. You know, they have all, and you guys got your shirts and your hats and stuff, and obviously that kind of goes with any car club, but they are dressed like, they've got like Ferrari shoelaces on, and they've got like, you know, everything's Ferrari, and then they've got black driving gloves on, and you've been talking to them for 20 minutes. It's like, what's up with the gloves, dude? Like, they're driving, you're not driving, we're talking. And this community isn't like that, you know? When I told my mom on Saturday I was coming up here, and she goes, I swear to God, I'll be 50 in October. She goes, you better wear a nice pair of pants and a nice shirt. And I get up here, and no offense, but we're all dressed like slobs. So, so it's just been fun. Like Wednesday night, Rich, Don, and I, we were having dinner in the hotel, and I keep forgetting their names. Correct.
Right there.
There you go.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah. One of these days, I swear, I'll get it.
It's all
You guys sat down with us and had dinner, and I think we talked for like 2 or 3 hours. And we talked about all different subjects, the car and where they had been and things like that. And I was like, well, okay, if this is how it's going to be the whole time, then yeah, this is pretty easy. I can do this. So you guys are great. I mean, thank you for having me. And, I hope I can have contributed something this weekend to you guys that, so. Yeah.
Did you ever ask your father what was he thinking when all of this went down? I mean, a confrontation, or that ever happened?
No.
So the question was, did Zach ever ask his dad directly, like, what was he thinking about that drug deal? What was he thinking about this particular thing? And I know this has been questions I've asked of you during our research of, years and years. And it isn't, I mean, you gotta remember, it's, as an outsider, you do think to yourself, you scratch your head, but if you think about your own family and any sort of things that happen in one's families, and there's sort of topics that kind of are off limits to a certain extent. It's an unspoken thing, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, no. In answer to your question, flat out, no. I never asked him. The reason why, I don't really know, but it's like Tamir says, it's kind of like, I guess it was just such a bad time for everybody that, why beat a dead dog kind of thing. And I didn't, and maybe I should have asked him, or maybe I should have asked him a different question, but pertaining to all that. But I always felt like he was sad that all that happened. Now, I don't mean, I'm sure he was sad, and for me and my sister, for us having to go through all that, but I mean, I never really got I personally don't ever feel that I got an apology or a sincere apology from anybody. Not the government, not my parents, nobody. But I always kind of felt like that maybe he felt that he had failed with the car, I mean, obviously he didn't, there's, I don't know how, maybe there's 20 of them sitting outside right now or something like that, and they're still around, mostly because of you guys. It just was like one of those subjects, and I kind of equated to like, well, why didn't he keep one of the cars around? Maybe it's just, he just didn't want to relive that memory. Maybe it could have been partly pride. Maybe he was upset. Maybe I don't really know. And honestly, for me, how do you bring that subject up? Like, hey, Dad, like, how the hell did you get involved with a bunch of fucking drug dealers in the FBI? Like, it's not really dinner conversation. So I just always kind of let it go. And there were times that we would talk about certain things. Like, I wanted to see the farm go in a different direction. He wanted it to go this way. And we would have arguments. And me being in my early 20s and being a jackass and a punk and a wise ass and not understanding authority or anything else like that, and not really having a full grasp of that it was his property, which it was. And I have a very different take on things now about life and money and property. But he once said to me, he's like, well, this is my fucking property. I'll do with it what I want. And my dad didn't really ever get pissed, but that night he got pissed, and it's like, okay, maybe I should back this one off about maybe like 5 feet, because like my dad is 6'4", 185, and that's a big man. Like, it's a skinny guy, tall, skinny guy, but like when he was pissed, it was like, that was like, I didn't want any part of that shit. So, you know, it just wasn't really ever anything we brought up. Like, we didn't even really talk about the car. We didn't really talk much about his days at GM or the GTO. And now that he's gone, you know, I kind of wish I had talked to him a little bit more about, maybe not like the drugs and the stuff, but more of the history and stuff. And I know things about him, about his lifestyle and growing up as a kid and things like that. But in answer to your original question, the short version is no, I never did ask him.
Another one. When we drive the car, gas stations, grocery stores, everybody knows the name DeLorean, but we can leave it in the garage. You've lived your whole life. There's no way when somebody says, "What's your name?" and you say, "Zach DeLorean," 90% of the time I'm guessing people go, "Like the car?" How do you deal with that?
That's a good question.
So, like right after the trial and everything, I was always like, and I think I was maybe 14 or something like that, 13 or 14 right after the trial. So I was always apprehensive because the name,
Unique.
well, not just unique, but like the trial just ended and he was acquitted and it was in the papers and it's been in the papers for months. So I was always hesitant to say, oh, you know, my name's Zach DeLorean. If somebody asked me, because I didn't want to deal with having to answer questions because I was young and I didn't know how to answer them, I didn't know what to say, and I didn't know how to act or take that praise or non-praise, whatever you want to call it. And 40 years later, there's a lot of, like when I say my name, a lot of people don't even know. Like, and it depends on the age of the person. So like I work with, so I bartend and I wait tables. And so aside from my general manager, who's probably about 52, I'm the next oldest person who works in that restaurant. And then it drops down to 36, and then maybe 34, and then it drops like down to 25 all the way down to 19. And there's like girls in there that have never even seen Die Hard. They've never seen Top Gun.
Blasphemous. Terrible.
I just about, I had some issues the other night with one of our servers. And like, who the fuck hasn't seen Top Gun? I mean, come on, Tom Cruise. And she goes, isn't that the one, I know the actor. She goes, Tim. And I'm like, stop. Stop, shut up. So I think like the older, like people like 40 and up will recognize the name if they're paying attention. But I think because my dad in the car, and it's been so long since any of that has been in the papers and in the front of people's minds, I think that, like I said, unless they're really paying attention, like I don't really get a lot of that anymore. I mean, I'm still like, when somebody introduced or I shake hands with, oh, I'm Zach. You know, I mean, I'm still I still fly real low under the radar. I mean, even though all this has happened, and a lot of it is because I just live a quiet life. So, but like, I always say, if you were born before 1982, you know the car was a real car, production, put on the road to drive. If you were born after 1984, you think it was just a prop for a movie. And, you know, which is fine, you know, because that movie and then groups like this keep the car alive, you know. But unless somebody's paying attention, they don't really, you know. Now, I do have a friend of mine when we go out and he introduces me around. He's like, yeah, man, that's Zach DeLorean. You know DeLorean? And I'm like, dude, shut the fuck up. Came out for beers, man. Beers and wings. Shut the fuck up. Unless it's a really good-looking woman. I'm like, go get her, man.
That's hilarious. I'm just going to ask one question, then we'll go back to the audience. But going back to the question that was asked about, what you spoke about with your father. I mean, watching him sort of become an outcast to the automotive world after the drug trial, he obviously still had things to contribute. What was it like watching him sort of try behind the scenes to still push his ideas, whether it be, certain patents or advancements that he had that he was trying to make with Fred Dulles, even as a quiet behind the scenes inventor, because obviously he knew the name itself has sort of been tainted within the general community. Did you ever talk to him about some of those things? Did he ever talk about where he wanted to take some of his new inventions?
Well, he was working on another car. I think he was going to call it. I think it was called like the DMC-12 or something like that.
Yeah, we see sketches of that.
Yeah, and it was real kind of. And he was coming up with this in the '90s, and you got to remember in the '90s everything was still very like the edges on cars were harder. All cars nowadays they all suck. Yeah, there's no.
I know it's
everything is soft and round, and they're just plain bullshit colors, and they all look the same. And I think the only thing that makes them different today is just the logo, as far as I'm concerned. But so when I see pictures of the car, I'm kind of like, man, I don't know about that, because he was getting into more a rounded look, but a sports car kind of rounded look. And so I would watch him, he would show me drawings and sketches and, concept drawings and, the thing with the watch, where he was going to do a DMC-12 watch that had a number on it. And the number and it was going to be like $3,000 for the watch. And the number on the watch was going to correspond with the VIN number of the car. So when you went into the dealer, you could bring the watch, give it to the dealer as a down payment on the car, but you couldn't keep the watch. But you would get that VIN number of that car, or that car with that VIN number. Or you could just pay for the car outright, have the car, and have the watch. It was a cool concept, but I don't know all the deals with Fred and things like that, but and this is going to sound harsh, but when I came home from school from Washington, D.C., and I moved back home in the 90s, I was watching him one day. He was out in the front. I think he was picking weeds. The guy picked more weeds than I had picked in my entire life. He was always outside picking weeds.
No, that's when I was there at Bedminster that one time. I came up to the house and he had
picking weeds.
He had his gloves on. He was picking weeds.
So either that, or he'd take the lawnmower and get it stuck in a mud pit, and I'd have to go pull it out. So, and I kind of looked at him. And so I'm adopted. I was born in '71. My dad adopted me probably between age 46 and 49, right around my age. So there was always a huge gap in age difference between me and my father. But I never really noticed it until I came home from school from Washington, D.C., and he looked real hunched over. And I was like, Jesus Christ, I've been gone for a while. He physically looked old. He looked like he was in his 70s, or late 60s, early 70s. So anytime I'd see him doing these drawings, and I just knew in my heart he was trying, but intellectually in my head, I knew it was never going to happen. But he never stopped working. So one day I came into the living room, and you guys know those, you go to the post office, you get the cardboard poster tubes. So there was 4 of them, about probably that wide. There was 2 on top, 2 on the bottom. So the thing was probably like that, and then it had some cardboard on the outsides kind of holding it in. And there's a hole drilled in the top of one of them, and he went out in the fucking garage and got a real spark plug and put it in this cardboard model. And I walked in, I'm like, what the hell are you doing? He's like, I'm designing a new engine. And the whole thing was gonna be ceramic. And so he never stopped working, but in my heart and intellectually, I just never saw it happening for him again. No matter who he talked to, no matter his friends, I just think that the industry just didn't want him back, is what I think. You know, but he never stopped working. He was always journal writing. He was always scribbling on that notepad, or you know, some crazy bullshit cardboard model with a spark plug in it, the concept drawings and watches, and you know, and I love him and I give him credit. You know, most people his age at 70, 75 years old, they're retired, sitting down in Florida waiting to die on a golf course. You know, my dad he kept working, he kept fighting. The court cases, he owed the money. I mean, there's no doubt about it, he owed his lawyers. But what I really liked about him was he just never stopped fighting, whether he thought he was right or he was actually wrong. He just never stopped fighting. You know, and then, you know, and I knew we were going to lose the farm. You know, I just didn't know when. You know, and I'm watching this guy just, you know, the later years of his life, this guy who's done so much for so many people through the cars that, you know, and in my heart, it kind of broke my heart a little bit. You know, sure. Yep, sorry.
You talk a lot about your family and the connection you had when you were young and stuff. For 80% of us here, I'm just going to say 80, I'm not going to say 100. We all have a connection, a strong connection to Back to the Future, of course. Does the longevity of that movie, has that had like any impact on you, either positive or negative? And I just mean like in the last 20 years, not when it came out, but has that had any impact on your life, or to you is it just, that was some movie and I've seen it once or twice and that's it? Does that make any sense?
Kind of. I mean, I love the movies. You know, they're entertaining as hell. I couldn't tell you the last time I actually watched one. It's probably been longer than 20 years. Me personally, the movie hasn't impacted me in any way. I think if I'm understanding, I think I understand what you're trying to ask me, but personally, like emotionally, or it hasn't affected me. Intellectually, what it does is, it's like this group here. It keeps the memory of the car alive, right? And so in other words, and you guys keep obviously the car going. You know, the memory of the car and the history of the car. I mean, you got that room is crazy how much shit is in that room. I can't believe it. It's like, where the hell do you get all this stuff? I don't even think I have this much stuff. I guess the question that I ask myself is like, if the movie never happened, what would the car still be? Would the car be as iconic without the movie the way it is with the movie? Like the movie kind of like, I mean, I hate to say it to you guys because it's nothing against you and what you guys do, but maybe if the movie didn't happen, the memory of the car wouldn't be as popular, or you know, maybe not as many people around the world would recognize the car if they saw it, you know? So I think it's, I mean, I don't...
Yeah, no, it's
I don't
something,
know how to really answer
it's something
it,
owners
but-
deal with, and there's a vast different reactions that they have. It's a double-edged sword. I agree that it has definitely helped like, make the car iconic, but at the same time, I think there's a fair amount of people here that get a little irritated with the Back to the Future comments, because to them it's more than just a car, and more than just a prop of a movie. It's a passionate car. But then you've got Great segue,
I
Terry and Oliver.
just wanted to bring up something that you brought up at dinner, and you totally spun it around.
What,
would the
right now?
What would the movie have been without the DeLorean?
Well, yeah.
And I think that was a brilliant take. And what would like Michael J. Fox? We all know what it would have been without him.
Yeah.
It would have been a lesser movie without.
100%. Yeah. No, 100% for sure.
Well, so for when I moved to Cincinnati, I did my first job there was I got a job doing tree work with the National Tree Company, and so you can imagine what that was like when they found out who my father was and the DeLorean name. Well, there was one kid there, and this kind of I was wrong when I misspoke, because it does affect me, at least with this one guy, every day at work for like 2 fucking years when I was driving in the truck. So there's that, and he's a great guy. I mean, I love him. He's a hard worker, and I knew tree guys and landscapers, crews, we all fuck with each other. We will get drunk. We will hate each other, beat the crap out of each other, then go to work the next day and be friends and drink coffee. So we're a bunch of redneck, hillbilly, crazy pastors. But there's that line when they're in Doc Brown's house, and he goes, he's watching the tape for Doc Brown, like how they're going to get the energy for the car. And on the tape, he goes 1.21 gigawatts. And then Doc Brown freaks out and goes, 1.21 gigawatts, and run around with the fucking house. That was the line I always got every morning. 2 years in the truck, man. That and, because my beard gets a lot bigger, I don't know if you know Clint Eastwood movies, but the Outlaw Redford was, he always called me Jeremiah Johnson. Which is kind of a compliment. I'll take that over the 21 gigawatt thing. And the way I also look at it, if people like you in this room and that movie did not, or if you were not here, this group was not here, and that movie didn't happen, every one of those cars would probably be in a car crusher right now in some junkyard getting recycled. I mean, but it's, so I think between the clubs and the groups and the organizations in that movie, it kind of locks the fate in the history of the car forever. I mean, period. And I think whether it affects me or not it doesn't matter to me. It's, that's probably a good thing that it with the movie and you guys that it I mean, you guys are, you in the second documentary, they asked me about legacy. Well, I sure as hell haven't done anything to promote the legacy of the car for the last 40 years, you know what I mean? It's got my family name on it. So the legacy, I feel, and I didn't really explain it in the other documentary, but I've had more time to think about it. The legacy really lies with you guys. This is the legacy of the car. Like what's going on here and those cars outside and the way you guys treat them, work on them, that is the legacy of the car. That is the testament to keeping what my father wanted to do for the American people, but people also in general. And you guys are continuing that tradition. You guys are the ones where, I'm not putting stress on you guys by saying this, but it's like it's on your shoulders. It's but in a good way, not a bad way. And I think that's like, if you guys weren't here, I don't think these cars would be here. I really don't, because I hear stories all the time, like, they find them in some barn somewhere in North Dakota, and they find them under a pile of hay that's been sitting there for 20 years. Cigar shop I go to, one of the guys there, it's like, yeah, went into this house. It was a estate sale or something, and found there was a DeLorean in there, and I was afraid to open it up because it looked like a family of raccoons was living in it. So he's like, yeah, I'm not opening that fucking door. So so you guys, I think, are the legacy, and I think that's the, I don't know if I'm explaining it right, but that's, if you weren't here, I don't think it would keep going. And I think the movie's tied into that. But I definitely, when I'm looking at you guys and then I think of the movie, I think of two separate things for sure. I mean, there's two different things about that. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah. I know that one of the cars your dad had later was an Acura NSX, and there's, I think, a picture with Tamir in that car. But when you see a car nowadays, do you ever have a indication or a thought that, Dad would have really liked this car, or Dad would have hated this car, and are there any examples that you could think of?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually.
Well, I have no idea.
Well, let's go back to at least the stapled cars that your dad enjoyed late in his life. I mean, I know the NSX, I had a pretty lengthy conversation with him about that particular car, and he was pretty smitten with what the Japanese were able to do with that car, and he drove two of them. You had a red one and then a yellow one. I know you've told me some entertaining stories.
Some good stories, Carl.
Yeah, I think
good times in those cars.
I think maybe you could share one or two. I know there's one of your dad that he evaded one or two police officers with the NSX, turning the lights off, driving about 100 down the road.
Yeah,
and
turning into the driveway.
Yeah, so maybe I think people would get a kick out of some of those.
So during that whole time in the 90s when he leased those two cars, he was in lawsuits. So when I came home from school, my dad was big into Mercedes. He's always had one or two Mercedes cars. And the last one, the last car Mercedes he had was the S-Class. I think it was the S500. He wanted the 600 because it had a V12 in it, but they wanted another like 20 grand for the car, and he's like, I'm not paying that. So he bought that car, but as they started trying to lock down all his assets, he sold the car. And then he leased the Jaguar, which I fucking totally submerged that car, and they sent it back to the dealer, and
well, you can't gloss over that. What do you mean submerge this Jaguar?
So he sold the Mercedes and he leased this Jaguar, which was a two-door convertible, and it was a real pretty car, nice color, and it was pouring down rain one day, and I was like, well, can I just take the car for a drive? And I was like, I had to go run an errand and go to the gun store, and I was like, can I take the car? And he's like, yeah. And I hate Jaguars, but but it was a lease, and I was like, it's a lease. If anything happens to it, the company can have it back, and it doesn't cost us anything. That's not really necessarily true, but so it is pouring down rain, and I'm in this Jaguar, and I'm sitting in traffic for like 20 minutes, and I'm like 25 years old. Now I'm starting to get like pissed, annoyed. Like in my 20s, I was going, like my hair was on fire all the time. So what ended up happening, and I found this out after the fact, when it happened, the reason why there was traffic was because one side of so I was trying to make a left-hand turn and then make a right-hand turn in the parking lot of this sporting goods store. Well, the right-hand lane after the left-hand turn I was trying to make was flooded. But I couldn't see that side of the road because of all these cars that were in my way. So I'm like, fuck this. So I go out and around all these cars, cut into the lane that was gonna go, you had to go straight, you can only turn from this one lane, go all the way around, gunning it. I'm probably doing like 45 miles an hour, and I hit this fucking puddle of water. And I mean puddle. I mean, water went over the front of the car all the way over the back of the car. And then it stalled. And so these
Big shocker.
Yeah. Well, and so all these people are going by and they're looking at me and I'm like, yeah, what's up? Trying to do one of these in the window, like feeling like a jackass. So then I'm sitting there for a minute and then water starts coming in from the floorboard. And on the passenger side, apparently on that side of the car, the puddle was deeper. There's like that much water in the passenger side of the car. So this good Samaritan decides, he comes over, he's like, yeah, I'll just push you in with my truck and put you in a spot in the park. Well, that spot he put me in was perfect because I had to go into the store, which is right there, and get my ammo and camo and some other shit. So I parked the car, I come back in, I'm like, it should start now. Well, the car didn't start, so I had to have the car towed back to the farm. So then, I didn't really quite tell my father what happened. I just said, yeah, I was driving, went through a little bit of water, and parked the car, went in, did some stuff, came out and it wouldn't start. So my dad had it towed back, had Jaguar come get it. So Jaguar's going through the car, and apparently there was a shit ton of water in the engine, in the air ducts. I mean, the car was just destroyed. And they were trying to get my dad to pay for it. My dad's like, no, my son said he only went through 2 or 3 inches of water in the car, and all this other shit. So there's a lot of stories like that with me and my father's cars, but not like damage, but just being young and taking the Acura out and doing 150 going down the highway, so and fucking up the traction control system. That was a good one. Pickup trucks I've actually destroyed. One truck so when I was younger, there's a big field out in the back of our farm, and my buddy would come over and we would go four-wheeling in the farm truck. And I guess we were probably about 16, 17 years old. So in one sitting, I got the truck stuck. And I mean, I got it stuck. And my buddy gets out, he's like, the wheels aren't moving. I'm like, well, it's in four-wheel, man, it'll be fine, Well, so we couldn't get it out with the tractor. And this happened in the middle of the night, my dad's sleeping, the kids are out getting high, drinking beer and whiskey and fucking up the farm truck. We get it stuck. I mean, I got it, I buried the truck up to the wheel wells in mud. So we go try and get the tractor won't get it. So we were going back into the city because this was I was in 10th grade at the time, so we still had the apartment in New York. So it was Sunday morning, so I'm such a dick. So I draw a map for the farm manager, an approximate map of where I left the pickup truck. Don't tell my father, leave it on the manager's desk. We go into New York, and Bruce goes out to get it. He calls a wrecker. The wrecker that they brought out gets stuck. So he has to call another wrecker to get that wrecker to get the truck out. So they finally get all this shit out. In one sitting, it needed 4 new tires, a whole new 4-wheel drive system, a new transmission, and new shocks. And that all happened within 2.5 hours of me and my friend just fucking around in the truck. So anyway,
your dad's a good sport because he kept letting you drive these vehicles.
This is what I figured out, is the reason why I think he never said anything was because I think he'd rather have us fuck a bunch of shit up on the farm than to go out in the public doing the stuff that we were doing and having to pay a lawyer and court fees and fines and getting my ass out of jail. That farm saved my life, man. So, but so then he had the Jaguar, and then he had the two Acuras, and those cars were fun. As far as like, he always had like a Mercedes sedan, or he had some sort of sports car, you know. And then when we lost the farm, Sally, who is supposedly my stepmother, she ended up leasing. Mercedes had just come out with their SUV, the ML, whatever the hell that thing was, and then that's what he was driving in around for a long time. As far as like cars on the road today, I think he would kind of probably be kind of disappointed. I think he might feel the same way that I do, is that they're very homogenous. And Don and I were talking at the bar yesterday, and he had mentioned something about like how, like, when he was talking, I can't word it right, but so we were talking at the bar, and he's like, you know, there's no longer minivans. You know, women want bigger cars, bigger, you know, like pickup trucks and some other stuff. So like, cars are the market seems to be geared more towards women nowadays than it does, I think, men. You know, there's no, like if I had $40,000 burning a hole in my pocket, and I walked into a dealership, I don't know if I could find anything in there that I liked for $40,000. Now, if I had $1 million and I walked into a Lamborghini dealership, that might be a different story. But like, you know, like there doesn't seem to be like really, like does Mazda, do they even make the RX-7 anymore? Is there any, like, you know, Acura had the Integra for a while, you know, little two-door sports. It just doesn't seem like, everything's either like,
yeah, I agree.
And I'm not saying that to be offensive to women, but I just think that that's where the market is right now. You don't have any station wagons. When was the last time you saw a new production line of minivans? Everything is like a Subaru Outback kind of thing. That's the new mom car or dad car, or
there's some
hipster.
outliers. Yeah,
That's
there's
the
some
new
outliers
hipster
out there,
car.
but yeah.
So I don't think there's really anything out there that
I think more from innovation. I mean, like, what would John have thought of the Teslas, for instance, of Elon Musk?
I think he would have liked that. I think he would have liked it, because they've done a really Tesla. I don't know much about Tesla or Elon Musk, but the whole car is electric. It's not a hybrid. It's not, you know. And I think
extreme speed, supposedly supposed to be eco-friendly, even though there's questions about the batteries and what it really means for eco-friendly.
Well, we'll figure that out 30 years from now.
When they're in dumpsters, when they're in landfill.
But I think that, like, and I think he would have been impressed. Like, I don't know much about Tesla and how that all got started, but it is tied with Elon, the way DeLorean was tied with DeLorean. Even though there's a whole bunch of players in the game to get the DeLorean manufacturing company going. And I'm sure it was the same with Tesla, but really, since my dad, Musk was the next, there hasn't been anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And Elon didn't start Tesla, but so it's a little different, but the model is, there's a very, starting with the sports car, then going to a sedan, which your dad wanted to do, and building from there and making it mass production, not specialty. Go ahead. I just want to make sure we get any other additional questions. Let's go here, then we'll go over here.
I want to first say a statement and then just ask you a couple more questions. But I think it speaks a lot to your dad's character that in his later 40s and having a prominent position in the industry and being single, he chose to adopt you. And I just think he's probably one of the most amazing fathers.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that. Yeah.
So, did you ever speak about your adoption, and do you know anything about your birth parents?
There's kind of a strange story about
birth parents, but we never, so when he married Christina, and so, all right, let me back up for a second. So he was married to Kelly when he adopted me. They got divorced, and then he married my mom. And my birth certificate, my father's name is the only name on my birth certificate. So when I say Christina's my mom, technically she's not like my adopted mom. She's definitely not my biological mom, but she's also like, her name isn't on my birth certificate, but of all the women that have been in my dad's life, she was in his life the longest, and also during my informative years, in development. So I refer to Christina as that's who I consider my mother. And so as I got older, I've always known that I was adopted. So and I don't understand people who do this, I really don't, but why do you tell your kid that they're adopted when they're 22 years old? I don't understand what purpose that would ever serve anybody, because then you hear these horror stories of the kid freaking out, becomes a drug addict, whatever it is. So from the time that I can remember, my mom and dad always told me I was adopted. And then I would obviously have questions about my birth parents. And it was a closed adoption. And my understanding of it through most of my life was my mother was young. I guess she was a student. My father, I want to say they told me that he was a college professor. So shit, 1970s, baby. And it was German English descent, and so my knowledge of my biological parents is very, very limited. As far as my family goes, John and Christina and Catherine will always be my family, and I get questions like, well, have you ever tried to go find your parents? I'm like, no, man, I've got two parents right here. This is my family. This is, and I think even if I went into Michigan, I don't know, maybe the laws have changed, but I don't even think that they would tell me who my mom was. If it's a clue, I don't know, something with Michigan maybe. So, so I just never questioned anything. I mean, this is my life, this is my story, this is my family. And so I got home from work one time, and I think it was like 2015, I was on a carpentry crew, and we hang cabinets and base and all this other stuff. And got home, man, had a long day, just got home, grabbed the mail, go upstairs, walk the dog, come back in, sit down with a beer, and there's this handwritten envelope. I'm like, man, who the fuck sends shit through the mail? It's always bills and, and so I open it up, and it's this guy, his name's Jim Avery, he lives in Michigan, and he's like, you don't know me, I believe that, John DeLorean adopted you, and, from I think this guy was my biological father's father, so this would be technically my grandfather on my father's side, saying John DeLorean basically adopted you and we're blood related or whatever. And he left his phone number. And I'm like, you gotta be shitting me, man. I go through my whole life, I'm 43 years old, why are people doing this now? Well, I contacted him and we were talking, and I was real skeptical about everything and very, I never said that John was my father. And so we're talking, and I'm like, I gotta ask you, man, I'm like, why are you contacting me now? And he's like, well, my wife and I discussed it a few years ago, and we're getting older in years, and we thought you should know some of your medical history and stuff. Well, he's telling me this stuff, and he goes, yeah, your dad, my son, your father,
died of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma disease. And I'm like, this is information I never needed to fucking know in my entire life. You know what I mean? Like, because, like, what you don't know, like, I don't need to know that, you know, my biological whole family died of a heart attack. You know, like, I like drinking, I like smoking, I like living my life, you know, you know, and I mean, I appreciate what they were trying to do, but I was just, you know, and he gave me the number of his son's wife, and I've tried to get a hold of her a few times. I think he gave me the wrong number and things like that. And, you know, he's like, I don't know how we prove that we're biologically related. And I was like, I have no clue. I mean, you know, I wouldn't even know where to begin to go get a DNA test. And, you know, part of me is like, I never really pursued any of it, and I still smoke, I still drink, I still eat like shit. And, you know, yeah, this is just kind of where my life is at. You know, I'm just going to kind of roll with it like that. So, I don't know, maybe one day I will, you know, reach out to them or something like that. But, I mean, I don't know if that answers any of your question, but.
No, I think that answers a lot. Right here.
I wanted to ask about a particular line in the documentary, and you both can kind of comment on maybe how it got there or the reaction maybe you had to it. But I find myself, when people ask me about John DeLorean, the last questions, and they'll say, well, how old was he when he died? And my response is, well, he was fucking 80 years old. And I thought that was such an amazing tribute to Zachary in the documentary. You know, my wife and I watched it for the first time. We legitimately knew that you were really the main star of the film, we thought. And we thought that was just an amazing way to end it. And I'm curious how that line got in there.
Yeah.
And also, Zachary, what your reaction was when you're in the theater and all of a sudden, you know, like a standard movie, you kind of read the end game, and then you see that, and what your reaction was.
Well, I'll start, just so Zach has a moment to not talk for a few minutes, catch his breath. But from a filmmaker's perspective, when Don and Sheen and myself wrapped that first day of shooting with Zach, which was the master interview day that you see his interview in, we were having our own beers that night, drinking, and we were like, fuck, we have the end of our movie now. I mean, it's just like, you know, and this was fairly early into the process, but we were like, what better way to end it than with the way that Zach would potentially want to see an end of the movie play out, you know? And obviously, that was just a line that Zach said. You hear him, he's sort of talking out what John would be doing, sitting at the table, eating his breakfast, and that's how it ended. And obviously with the humor of some of the way Zach's lines come off with the F-bombs, you know, it just felt appropriate at the end to just write fucking, like, you know, right there. And it clearly gets a good chuckle. I am curious, like, when you were watching it at the movie theater, what did you think when you saw that last part there?
People laughed. Yeah, people started laughing. Kind of took me by surprise a little bit, to be honest with you. I was like, uh-oh, this is not going well in any aspect of my life. So, but I mean, it was, I'm honored that he did it that way. You know, the scene with Alex sitting at the table, and because that's kind of how I always saw him. He was always messing with something on the table, and, you know, with the car or something like that. And then, you know, I mean.
Well, then also to something that was important for me is the filmmaker and someone that I wanted to make sure that if a DeLorean project got out there, it was being told in a truthful way. And with a lot of the fictional scenes, they are really rooted in deep research of truth for any of those scenes that were done. You know, obviously there's certain creative liberties taken here and there, but it's all for the sake of getting a certain aspect of John's personality or whatnot. John, at the end of his life, when he had the stroke, was sitting at a table writing, drinking a glass of wine, and Sally found him hunched over, and then they went to the hospital. I mean, so it's as close as it gets to what kind of really did happen. And so, you know, the fact that you describe it that way is a perfect way that also ended, because that's in real life, that's what happened. So, yeah.
Well, I just thought, especially when we say he was always working, he might have considered something like an electric car or something like that, always looking at improving designs. And I think when I look around here and I see the cars out there, I see people are improving the design. They're looking, how can I fix this? Like, how did somebody else do this? And how did somebody else do that? And I wonder if you'll consider us your family.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, it's I'll definitely come back to these events for sure. I've definitely got a lot to absorb in when I get home and think about. Go down, talk to my buddy, and smoke a bunch of cigars. But no, you know, it's like I said, man. I mean, I've really enjoyed coming here. You know, I think I went out there this morning, and if you walk up where the cars are parked, the very, like, there may be more added now, but it's where the carburetor boys hang out. And you know, they're all sitting there, and one guy's sitting in a lawn chair and a little hungover, it looked like, and yeah, two of the other guys are you know, they got like a little socket set out, and they're, you know, wrenching on something, and it was like, yeah, you know, thermostat, I think it was the thermostat. He's like, yeah, thermostat problem's fixed. And I was like, fucking A, man, you know, this is what I came up here for. Because I was, you know, and that's the fun part. I think that's what, like, you know, I've heard it from everybody in here. I mean, these cars are 40 years old, you know, and, you know, shit's gonna break, you know, and, you know.
It's our love-hate relationship.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, you get it. You know what the hell I'm talking about. So it's, you know, and to see, like, watch the presentation on the car, you know, adapting the, you know, taking this off and now making it carbs, and, you know, a leaky hose, you run a Pep Boys and they got it, and, you know, that's the stuff that I think is cool, you know, and then like all the, like your guys' car, nothing is, would you say?
Non-invasive.
It's non-invasive, so nothing's like, you can take it all off and it'll all be fine. I mean, that takes creativity.
And how many miles do you have on that car now? It was almost close to 1 million, right?
Well, we kind of stalled last year, but we're at 827,000.
Unbelievable. I mean, 820,000 miles on that car. That's insane. No rust, you know?
Well, that's just it. Like, how many, well, that's just it. Like, you know, how many cars, pick a manufacturer, Lamborghini, Ferrari, Ford, Chevy, I'm sure Tesla, any of them, you know, how many of their cars, pick one, any model, not one. I guarantee you there's probably not one car on the road from any manufacturer that has gone 800,000 miles and still running.
They're in
We're going to
junkyard.
keep going.
That's impressive.
You know, so, you know, there's no rust, like Tamir's saying, and things like that, you know, I mean, that's impressive stuff. So, like, you know, this is a great community. I mean, I'll definitely be coming back, and hopefully by the time I'll have my license in a car and up here, or a motorcycle, maybe a motorcycle, but probably a car because I got the dog. But, I mean, you guys have been great. You really have. I mean, this has been just a really great experience for me.
Oh, we loved having you here.
Yeah,
and I think we're probably going to just wrap up. If there's additional questions, I mean,
yeah,
Zach's an open book. You know where.
I don't want to wrap up.
I
want to keep going.
Great, you want to keep.
It's up to you.
Well, is there one or two more questions that someone wants to chime in on?
Just a commentary. So thank you so much for coming, because we kind of got a feel for what your father was like, and if anything, you're a great example of what he was about, and we were always curious about that. I mean, many of us have met John DeLorean, but you're a great representation of somebody who's really humble, really intelligent. Love the fact that you're a wrencher. I totally dig that, and it's really cool that you're a part of our community. And just to know that your father was such a good parent to you, it speaks a lot about your family, and we love having you a part of our family as a result. I know other people have said it, but thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. No, that means a lot. You know, that's not. Yeah, I don't hear that every day in my life. That's for damn sure. You know, oh, you're a good guy. Yeah, that's not what I hear.
You are.
It's no, I've gotten that from a lot of people, and that really does mean a lot. You know, and I always, like with the documentary and Tamir, I just wanted to paint a picture of how I viewed the whole situation, and I just wanted an honest picture painted of how my dad was in life. You know, really great father, but could be a little shady in business. You know, you know, but and that's just kind of life. You know, I'm not perfect. I'm not a Boy Scout. I'm not an angel. You know, I've spent a couple nights in jail, and gone in front of a couple judges, and for different reasons other than what my father did. But you know, but I appreciate it, man. I mean, it means a lot to hear that and somebody say that about my father and my family, and I really do appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I had a question. What did Mom think about the ending of the movie?
She loved it.
Did she want to wash your mouth out? Or
yeah, she could have done without the F-bombs.
Yeah, she probably could have done without the swearing and stuff. I can't remember. It's been a minute now since that came out, so I can't remember what she said about it.
She loved it. I mean, it was pretty surreal. So there was a West Coast premiere that occurred right before the film was released, and actually there's one person here that's right here. He had one of his DeLoreans there. It was at the Peterson Museum. We had about 40 cars there. They brought out the gold DeLorean from the vault, and in the front row there was Christina, there was Howard Weitzman, Jerry Williamson was there. That was the first time he was watching the film, and a few other people. But afterwards, she was and Bob Gale was there, and he conducted the Q&A with myself and the directors afterwards. But she was just blown away by it, both her and Howard. But Howard's critique was a particularly nice one to get from him, just because of somebody who's lived with it and has spoken about it so many different times to different various people. He was just really blown away with the way we unfolded the story, and Christina just was kind of smitten with it. So yeah, really well received on her part. You had a question?
Yeah. Sorry if you see me typing. It's because I'm live blogging this entire thing from a friend whose girlfriend got sick and he couldn't make it. I've read that John did a lot of work with his church towards the end, and I wondered if you knew of any humanitarian work he did, because I know he was big into promoting hiring of minorities and things at GM.
So, like I said, right after the trial, I lived so basically from 84 to the summer of 88, I lived in Los Angeles, and for a little bit with my dad, and then the bulk of it with my mom. So this story takes place in that time period. My dad was still out in LA, and this is before I had to go to court with my mom, Tony, and my sister for a custody hearing for me and my sister between my mom and my dad. So my dad over winter break, he planned a trip for me, my sister, and my dad. We went out to Vail, Colorado to go skiing, and I forget how long we were there. And I think it was over Christmas, so I think we spent Christmas out there. And so my dad's like,
and I can't remember exactly how this all unfolded, but anyway, we went to a store and we bought, I want to say we bought a bunch of groceries. Well, my dad bought a bunch. It's not like we had money, my sister and I, but so we all went. We picked out some groceries. We picked out some Christmas gifts, and what we were doing was my dad, through a church, found a family through a church that was down on their luck, so to speak. I don't know I can't remember, and I didn't know the full situation at the time, but I think the father may have lost his job at the time, and it was right around, the holidays and things, and I think they didn't have a lot of money and couldn't afford things for Christmas, so we went to the store, got a bunch of groceries, some gifts for the kids, and we went and spent time with his family and dropped off the groceries and had dinner with them and things like that. He may have even, if he did, I didn't see it, but I would imagine that my father probably gave him some cash or a check or something as well too to help them along and things like that. I don't know how much, because I was gone from home for a lot, and then come home and I'd leave, go home, leave, go home, and leave. So I don't really know exactly how involved he got with going to a suit. I knew when he was dating BJ and he lived in New York, he would do like soup kitchen type stuff around the holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas and things like that with BJ. BJ was a woman that he had dated for many years. And you want to talk about somebody who had a connection to God. If she was sitting right there and I fell off that stage and broke my leg, I guarantee you she'd come over there, put her hand on my leg, he'll say a prayer, and I could probably run a marathon 4 minutes later. So the BJ was, I love her to death. She's just a very intense lady, so I could see her getting my dad involved in a lot of things like that. So
I think the more interesting aspect of it, that's an interesting question, is a lot of people saw your dad's sort of rebirth after the trial as a little bit of a publicity stunt. There's a lot of cynicism that goes with sort of that born again aspect and how it plays into reformatting someone's image. Under the hood, as somebody that was as close to to him as you were, was it a little bit of BS? Was it very genuine? I mean, I know from my research it was very genuine from what I could tell in terms of his studying and Bible scriptures and everything else he was going for. But at the time, did you feel like there was something weird about how the light sort of switched on?
yeah, man, I mean, shit, if I got caught in a hotel room in LA with 33 kilos of cocaine and was going to jail, I'd find God real fucking fast. Hell yeah. I think,
But he kept it on late after the dust
that is
settled.
true.
And his relationship with BJ, who's another person that we actually interviewed for the film, unfortunately didn't even make it into the special edition. At some point for one of these future DCSs, I'm going to have to pull the archives of some of these interviews that hit their cutting room floor, because she is a fascinating character and knew your dad very well.
Yeah.
I mean, they dated for at least a decade, right?
Yeah.
8 years?
Easy.
Yeah.
I think, like I said, when he got out of jail, I think part of that was show, in my personal opinion. Because from his arrest to the trial, we started going to church. We started, they did the whole baptism thing at the farm with a preacher, a born again guy, and all this stuff. So, there is that time window of 2 years before the trial. So I think part of it was to kind of give him this, kind of polish up the image a little bit going into the trial. But after that happened, He was going to church all the time. He'd go to Bible study once a week. This is even when he lived in LA right after the trial, and I was living with him and stuff like that. And then, every once, you walk into the living room at Lamington Farm, and you catch him reading the Bible. If you go through his Bible, there's all kinds of stuff underlined and things like that. So I think over time, I think over time in his lifetime, especially, in the latter years of his life after the trial, that he really believed in God. Like he, believed in the Bible. And I think it was no longer about his image anymore. You know what I mean? If that kind of makes sense. So, and BJ and I have talked, and BJ and I lost touch, but when I was talking with her, we talked about my dad, and she felt a little bit that the reason like somebody like Sally and who's that prick's name?
Is that about the lawyer?
That's it?
No, Chandler Harvey. So like Sally came into his life, and Chandler, and the reason why he's not doing well with these court cases and the lawyer was because she felt that he was kind of drifting away from his faith. And she believes that if he had not drifted away, I mean, he didn't drift like way out, but he wasn't going to church as much anymore and things like that. So, but he was I still think he believed in God and was keeping the faith and everything. Like, I think that all the way up till the end. But like, right when he got arrested, nah, man, I think that was, I think him coming out, yep, I found Jesus. Yeah, I'm sure he did, man. So, but.
Other questions here? Yeah.
I was just going to say, from getting to know Zach over the last few days and seeing how everything has developed, I mean, growing up and just being around your father, you imagine a lot of people have this stereotypical image of you being this rich boy on, having all this stuff, but being the person you are and how you grew up, it sounds like you got into mischief when you were younger and hanging out with people you did, finding friends you did. Like, how was it when you went to school before and during and after? Like, how you find friends? How did you connect? How did those relationships bond throughout the years, all the way up to the 90s as you got older? How did you keep close contact and socialize with your guys? Like, how'd you hang out?
Yeah, I did get in a lot of trouble as a kid. I basically ended up in rehab by the time I was 17 years old. So I got my GED in rehab. Right after the trial, so like I've done a lot of talking like in the last 2 days, and normally in my life that is not what I do. Like, I drink beer, I work, I hang with my dog, I watch old westerns, I keep to myself and read, and that's my life. This is like way the fuck out of my comfort zone. But it's okay. Like, I'm not like freaked out or anything about it, but just to give you an idea. So like in school, I was always a quiet kid to begin with. And I would have friends, but I didn't have like a lot of friends. I knew all the people in so I also went to private school pretty much all the way up until 10th grade, and then the summer in between 10th grade and 11th grade, I ended up going to Minnesota, and that's where I was in rehab for 4 months. So private school, it's not like you're in a class of 100 people. Like some of my classes, when I was in 10th grade, the whole class was like 15 people, So, there may have been like 50 people in the whole high school or something like that. So, you end up getting to know everybody in the, in that setting, you knew everybody in the school. So I would know all the people in my classes, but I would, you gravitate towards 1 or 2 people that you like to hang out with, but you were friendly with everybody else. So when I moved back in '88 to New York, we were staying out on the farm
that summer, and I called up some old buddies of mine I hadn't seen in like 4 years, and these were all guys that I rode motorbikes with. And that was the bond for me, was the bike. So I call them up, we get to, oh shit man, where have you been? And then we'd start, yeah, I'll ride over, and I could ride, you know, what would take like 10 minutes on road by car. You know, you're riding through 1,000 acres of somebody's property in New Jersey, you know, and I'm just like, yeah man, I'll be over there in like 5 minutes, you know, and you're like fucking hauling ass through these woods, you know. And and through that, I'd go to a party at one of my buddy's houses, and I ran into this kid who I went to summer camp with that I had totally forgotten about because I had been in LA for 4 years. His name was Andrew, and Andrew and I got together, we hooked up, and we were like inseparable. And he would go to boarding school, but anytime he was home, we were always hanging out on weekends and holidays and during the summer and stuff like that. And then when I went to like art school and community college, man, I didn't really associate with anybody, because when I went up to community college in upstate New York, this is a bad recurring theme in my life, but I was following my girlfriend up there. That's how I ended up in Ohio too. So I was always hanging out with her and stuff like that. And unfortunately, I had another good friend. He just died recently that I found out on the internet, actually. And I'd known him for many years, like 10, 15 years. But I lost contact with both those guys because about 6 years ago, I was drinking real heavy. I mean, like I could drink, like when I would go home, if I had scotch at home, like I'd pour like 3 fingers of scotch in a glass, crack open a beer, and I'd probably do that for like 4 hours. For a long time, I'd get off work, go home, shower, change, go to the bar, sit at a bar for 8 hours, get home around 2, get up about 6, and go to work. And I repeated that cycle for about 7 years, and that's what caused for me to lose contact with Andrew and Chris. But I made a couple friends over in Ohio. I've got 1 or 2 good friends there. I don't really see them very much because, you know, as you get older, you have more responsibilities, or at least they have more responsibilities, like 2 kids and a divorce and a marriage and all that other stuff. So I'm pretty content with just having the dog. No kids. Boy, did you fuck up. I've
got a little 5-month-old right now.
How much do you want for your DeLorean out there, man? If I can come up with some cash for your college tuition, I might buy it.
College is overrated these days.
Yeah,
It'll be fine on the open market.
So, I mean, I don't know if that answers your question, but, you know, but right after the trial, high school was hard for me, you know, because all that stuff was so fresh. Like, you know, you'd be out on the soccer field playing soccer with, you know, on a bunch of guys and stuff. Some smart ass would say something about your mother, and, you know, because there was speculation that my mother had affairs, so she was a whore, and then my dad was a drug dealer, and the cocaine's packed in the doors, and I'm just like, okay, man, you know. So next thing you know, you're scrapping, rolling around on the soccer field with 3 guys trying to stomp their heads in with your cleats, but, you know, it's, but like I said, I mean, I've always been real quiet and pretty much kept to myself, so. And a lot of years too, I've had a lot of, many girlfriends, and they kind of dominated my time as well, so there didn't really always leave a lot of room for going out and having a good time with your buddies and stuff like that.
That's totally understandable. Like, I used to be quiet when I was in school too, but, you know, you find people with common interests, and you don't expect a 25-year-old to be hanging out with 78-year-old white guys here, but here I am. So.
Right. Well, growing up, like, especially on the East Coast, was, you know, like I said, it was we all rode motorcycles. So like out in New Jersey, it's all farm country, and a lot of the a lot of my friends kind of came from like old money. I mean, like old money. And, you know, they have thousands and thousands of acres that you can ride on, you know. So, and then when I moved to LA, you know, all that shit, well, not really moved, but kind of forced there, but all that shit went out the window. You know, my mom wasn't gonna buy a pickup truck to help me load up my motorcycle in and take me, and she wasn't gonna drive me and the bike to a motocross track like an hour outside of LA. It just wasn't gonna happen. So, because there was a time where my father and I, it was after the custody hearing, we didn't talk for about 2 years. Yeah, like he would call to talk to my sister, but he wouldn't talk to me. And that's kind of a long story, but and then we kind of patched things up, and then I ended up moving back east in '88. So,
You mentioned art school?
Yeah.
Could you elaborate?
So I went up to upstate New York. I was enrolled for 2 years at a community college, but I went for 1 semester. I discovered the Adirondack State Park was about an hour north of where I lived in maybe 2 hours north of Saratoga Springs. So I got into rock climbing and ice climbing and things like that. So then that dominated my time, and I kind of blew school off. Then my girlfriend up there, she broke up with me. So then I moved back home for a summer, hooked up with this other girl there. Fucking women. And I followed her down to Washington, D.C. So, and for a little while, I had a motorcycle. I rode a crotch rocket down there, and I was a courier. Back then, it was like, you know, you had like messenger couriers on bicycles. Well, I had a motorcycle, so, you know, I was running packages with that. And that got old. So I applied to, I did that for about 6 months. And so then I applied to, there's a school down in Washington, D.C. called Corcoran School of Art. And Corcoran was a very wealthy man back in the day. Maybe 1800s or something, I don't know. And he built a museum, and so the upper part of this building is a museum, and the lower half is the Corcoran School of Art, so I applied to that. And I went, I think I was there for about maybe a little over a year, and it was just a weird scene, man. Art school is like, the people that go to art school are fucking weird. And they really are. I mean, you know, they're good-hearted people. It's just like they're just very weird, and it was very. I couldn't find a teacher I related to. I couldn't find anybody in there that I really related to. Like, you know, one girl wore, like a couple of them, they all wore all black, and they called themselves artists, and I was like, okay, just because you wear all black and you paint black doesn't mean you're an artist. And so I got kind of like, it wasn't meshing for me, and I don't really do a lot of art anymore. I haven't for a very long time, and actually I got a funny story. So when I applied as a fine arts major, but then I learned I couldn't draw. So I went into photography. So that's what I changed my major to. And I really loved photography. And at that time, there was like no digital. Digital hadn't, like, if you had a digital camera, you paid like 15 grand for that thing. And then like infrared film was just coming out and things like that. So but I decided to leave school, and I moved back home, and then I was kind of doing my artwork back up at home, but then I think I had another girlfriend, so that kind of like distracted me. And see the theme here with women, like, you know, I'm doing something, then I get distracted, and then I get, you know.
And then I went back to rock climbing in the later 90s and started working in gyms, rock climbing gyms. And then me and my buddies would go spend like 2 weeks in a tent at a cliff somewhere, and then I'd go back and I needed more money, so I would keep working and things like that. So when I was coming up here, I'm like, yeah, man, because I hang out with a guy down in Cincinnati who's done a lot of photography and movie stuff, and he's been all over the place. So he got me, we get to talking, and he got me all excited about photography again. So I'm like, all right, man. I was like, I wonder if I still have that camera. So I go into the closet, and I pull out this camera, just a Canon 81 35 mil, and there's a roll of film. I'm like, this is what I'm gonna take up there, man. Fuck yeah, because I wanted. So my friend is doing a lot of. He's helped me out a lot. So I wanted to get some pictures of the cars on 35 millimeter film and get them developed into a nice big like 8x10 form, and just give them to him. And so I'm looking at this roll of film. It's a roll of black and white, and I look at the expiration date, and it's like 10/2014. I'm like, fuck, man, you know, I'm like, damn. I didn't realize they had expiration dates. So I tell my buddy this, and I was like, you got a couple rolls of 35 mil I could take with me? He's like, I don't know, I'll look. And he couldn't find anything. He's like, and he had picked me up and we were doing some stuff. So he's like, I was like, where the hell do you go to get 35 millimeter film? Like today. And he goes, let's go to Walgreens. So I go into Walgreens, I'm fucking up and down every aisle of Walgreens, come out smoking a cigarette. No film. He's like, let me take you to CVS. CVS always had film. Up and down everything. He's like, and I don't know what grocery stores you guys have, but our big brand is Kroger, and the Kroger grocery stores are usually really, really big. And so he drops me off in front of Kroger, and I go into Kroger, and I'm going up and down every single aisle in Kroger, and I still couldn't, like, I'm in the peanut aisle. There's no film in peanut aisles, you know? And I couldn't find it, so I brought the other roll. I'll shoot it, you know, I'll shoot that roll, but
I bet you it'll work.
Yeah, I should. But you know, I mean, I liked art school. What I kind of walked away from with art school, what I found that I was good at was good. I use that term loosely, but what I had fun with is materials. Is working with not so much like the overall finished product of aesthetics, what it looks like. I mean, to a certain extent, aesthetics, but working with the materials themselves, no matter what it was, like paint or pastels. You know, how many layers of acrylic paint can I put on a piece of canvas to get, you know, and then how much of the layers underneath is going to be transparent and come through, and you know, and it can go on and on and on. And I actually did a few pieces. I've lost them, but they came out pretty good. I just don't know. Probably one of my ex-girlfriends probably has them, but probably took them when she moved out of the house. But art's a cool thing. That whole scene sometimes is just really, really weird.
Well, I think we're gonna wrap it up, Rich, because
One more story that Zach had kind of relayed to me last night when we were eating dinner. I was talking to him about his dad, Roy, and let's say the Army and haircuts.
Oh shit, yeah, this is fucking great. So this kind of relates to art school, right? So I think everybody in art school is fucking weird. So this is no joke, but I've got hair down to here. I ride a crotch rocket. I smoke a ton of weed. And I'm dating this girl from Trinidad, but everybody else is fucked up, right? So I eventually moved back home, and I go home and I got long hair, and my dad kind of looked at me and he's like, "You gonna get a haircut?" I'm like, "Nope." And like maybe a couple months after I moved home, Roy Nesseth comes out, and
he came out to help my father like organize all these files. So at one time I walked into the dining room and there's like file folders like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and all the way up through the alphabet. And I'm like, what the hell is this guy fucking doing, you know? And so he's doing a bunch of stuff. Well, he was there for like 2 weeks. And so the three of us would have dinner every night, and the three of us would have breakfast every morning. So my father got Roy to start busting my balls about my hair. So I sit down at table, and now I've got both of them giving me a hard time about my long hair. And I'm like, okay, whatever, man. I'm like, yeah. So and my dad wanted Roy to take me to go get a haircut. And I'm like, I can drive myself to get a haircut. I don't need Roy taking me to get a haircut. And so about 5 days, 4 or 5 days, maybe, it goes by, and then it was at dinner and at breakfast, for like 4 days. So I was like, all right, man, okay, you know. And I grab a bunch of beers, I go upstairs into my bedroom after dinner, and I go into my dad's bathroom, and he has like hair clippers. I'm like, I'm gonna teach these fucking guys a lesson. So, drink these beers. Next thing I know, I'm in the bathroom in front of a mirror, and I am shaving my head with these clippers, and I get it all off, and then I bick it. So I take a shaving cream and I get it all the way down. And next morning I come down, I can't remember if I had like a headband on, like a bandana, or if I just came down bald. So Roy's down there, and I think my dad was down there. And I come down, I make myself a cup of coffee, and they're both looking at me. I think they were wondering who the hell I was and how I get in the house. And they're kind of looking at me, and I'm like, what's up, guys? You know? And you know, so they're like, what happened? I'm like, what do you mean what happened? Like, you guys have been busting my balls for like 5 days about a haircut. What did you think was gonna happen, you know? I was like, who do you think you're messing with, man? You know? So, yeah, they were, it was funny because the look on their face, my father, and they couldn't stop laughing. Once they figured out who it was, I mean, they laughed for like 5 minutes. They thought it was the funniest thing. Because like my face, because I was working outside all the time, so your body, you know, your body gets tan, your face is tan, and it's just like this big white, you know, and then I kind of think I had like a white, because I would wear like a ponytail, so you have like, where the ponytail lies on your neck, so I got like, you know, I'm like tan from here to here. I got like a skunk stripe down the back of my neck. My head's like white as hell, shit, you know. So it was, but I taught him a lesson. So that's important.
Amazing. Well, thank you again, Zach, for coming out. Anyone else has questions, you can find Zach